It's that time of year again. Halloween's just right around the corner, and I thought I'd do a little tutorial video on how to carve pumpkins. A couple of years ago, my wife and I, we decided to stop doing just regular faces on pumpkins, and we decided to do more creative, artistic pumpkins, sometimes doing different famous artwork or just themed pumpkins. And it turned out to be kind of a family tradition. So I want to walk you through a little tutorial. First thing I want to specify is that you pick out a pumpkin that you would like, find the image that you'd like to do, figure out pumpkin-wise, do you want more of an elongated one or a round one? Then take a look at the pumpkin, take a look at the shape, take a look if there's any flat sides, indentions. This might have been where the pumpkin, laid down on the ground. Make sure that there's no rotting, and the first thing I'm going to do, I'm right next to the sink, is to wash the pumpkin. So I'm just going to kind of go over it, and I want to get rid of any dirt that might be on it. I've got some dirt down on the bottom here. Sometimes you get a lot of mud and stuff. It just depends on what the weather's been like, where the pumpkin's been sitting, and how well it was cleaned off when it was cut from the stem. So I'm going to go ahead and wash it and come back to you. Alright, so she's all squeaky clean. Basically all I did is I just ran water over it. I didn't do too much scrubbing. I didn't want to take any of the skin off of it. And now everything's kind of nice and neat and clean. Another little pointer I'd recommend is that when you go off to the pumpkin patch and you buy these, maybe you buy to the pumpkin patch or the grocery store, and storing them, if you store them inside for a long time, sometimes you get bugs and other things that attract to them. So a lot of times you may want to put them outside as a decoration up until the time to carve them. For us, we've got an outside porch that's screened in, and we live kind of near some woods, and so we have a lot of active raccoons. So we try not to put them out there, but around this time, at least a day ahead of time, we try to bring it inside, try to get them cleaned up, let them get warmed up, and that's kind of a crucial thing. You've had them outside for a while, and they get kind of cold, and the last thing you want to do is try to work with it and it's all cold. Sometimes I think also it affects how you're able to carve into it, how stiff the thing is as well. But if anything, just simply having the coldness on your fingers for long periods of time, it makes it a little bit nicer to work with something that's room temperature. Next thing, I want to show you the tools that we're going to be using, and then we'll get started carving the top out, getting the guts out, and so on. Alright, so we're in our dining room right now with our dining room table, and to me one of the things is kind of using specific tools for this. And I've got different carving tools. I've got some wood carving tools that I try to use. Other tools came in kind of a set that were more holiday themed, little pointers to kind of poke holes into the surface. Nice little pumpkin, serrated kind of blades. This one was kind of a new one for us this year. It actually has kind of a blade, kind of a jigsaw kind of function. I've got a drill bits, a nice bowl to be able to put the contents, the guts in it. And then instead, this year, we normally would spread out all kinds of newspaper all over the place. This year we just opted to grab a couple of pizza boxes. We recycled the newspaper too early. So hold on to your newspapers when you get close to pumpkin carving. Alright, time to cut out the top and take out the guts. Alright, so at the top of my pumpkin, I'm going to try to make kind of a rounded cut around it. But the other thing I'd like to do is sometimes I also like to make another little notch out of it, kind of like a little point. A lot of times when you go and cut them out and you're trying to figure out how the actual thing sat back in the pumpkin, having that extra little notch can make it a very easy way to put the thing back on. Also, as you make your cut, you're going to want to try to kind of aim kind of down, but at a little bit of an angle, just a little bit, so that way you kind of make a kind of a corked kind of top for the top to go back on. Alright, so I've gone ahead and gone all the way around, and I've got this little point there to kind of help as a guide later on. What I'm going to do is pop the top and end up exposing all the guts inside. Next thing you want to do is you want to cut that the guts off of the top so you have a nice flat top. And here we are with the top where it's been cut. We removed the guts from just the top right there, and time to clear out the inside. Now what I like to do is I usually like to use like a big soup spoon, or also this little plastic spoon, and just go through and really carve out the inside, getting all the guts, and just scrape the inside out, and then eventually pull all the innards out, and then I can go back through and fine tune it and get specific seeds or the little strings that are inside it and get the rest out. Okay, so I went through and cleared out the insides. I really had more luck with this particular tool because it's kind of a stubbier tool versus the larger soup spoon. But you know, depending on the size of your pumpkin and just how much of a reach that you have to go in there, I found just this was the better tool to use. It was able to kind of scrape the sides. One thing I'd also recommend, I mean, obviously you want to get all the little stringy things as well, and depending on if you plan on using a candle or like a little LED light or something, which I'll talk about later in the video, you're going to want to make sure all those little strings and stuff are out of the way, mainly for burning purposes. Also, a lot of times pumpkins have kind of like a little point down in the center of the base of the pumpkin. Try to see if you can flatten that out just a little bit, so that way your candle or your tea lights or whatever you plan on using can sit in place right there. Next thing is coming up with a design to put on the thing, and this year I decided to do kind of a Lake Loch Ness kind of thing, with the Loch Ness monster, little Scottish piper, and a castle in the background, and the moon in the background as well. I also really liked how the lake was kind of shimmering, and the little reflections and stuff in it kind of added to it. Originally this was more of a tropical thing. It kind of looks like there's a palm tree next to the piper, and I've added those other details over the original image. So gonna kind of make this one my own. At this point in time, what I would suggest, if you can have access to a printer, you could print the image out, tape it onto the pumpkin, and then kind of puncture the pumpkin surface so you know where you need to make your cuts and stuff. Or if you have access to a projector, then you can actually have it be more 3D on the image as well. So, and that again can be kind of a useful tool to it. One of the things to talk about with the picture that I've got here, when we look at this kind of a pumpkin carving, we're looking at shadows, we're looking at different light intensities on here, and the brightest ones that you see there, those are the ones that are completely cut out. They're holes that go into the actual pumpkin. So we're looking at the moon, probably the stars, the shimmering on the loch as well, or the lake, and then maybe a few windows in the castle area might be an idea. Or I could even do the eye from Nessie as well. Then the next set of intensity, you're looking at just removing the skin, the outer skin of the pumpkin, kind of carving that away. And then depending on if you want to have more kind of ripples or different shades of the surface, I can shave away the inside of the pumpkin so it's not as thick, so light is able to travel through that pumpkin matter and then produce a certain intensity. So the next thing I'm going to do is try to go through and find the surface that I want to put this on. I've got my pumpkin here, and I've got a couple of options. Kind of the more rounded side, I could do the flat side if I wanted to. And another little shout out that I mentioned about using these pizza boxes. They are great to just kind of spin your pumpkin around as needed. When I used the newspapers, they weren't able to do that at all. But they don't cover as much, and the mess can kind of get around. Anyway, I'm going to try to choose probably one of my more flat sides, and I'm going to go through and kind of hand draw it on here. Our printer's kind of defunct right now and out of ink, and I don't have access to a projector right now to blow the image up onto it. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to draw it, and then I'll kind of show you what it looks like with. Here is the rough kind of draft of it. I went through and kind of free-handed the overall shape that I wanted, the moon and the other details as well. But probably the hardest part was the Piper, in which I had to kind of trace off the computer, and then I'll go through and use my carving tools and kind of transfer it into this location as well. One of the things I suggest that you do, just like you would with wood carving, all along your edges, I would go through and I would puncture the surface along the lines that you have. And then you can go through and remove the surface material as needed. And when you get to the very edges, it won't actually chip away and go past that amount. So just a little pointer there. Alright, so I went through and kind of scored the entire border of all the cuts that I'm going to make. And in between those cuts is where I'm going to remove the different materials. Went through and put my Piper in right there. Looks pretty good. And I didn't say also earlier that I used marker-wise, I used kind of a dry erase marker. This seemed to work the best on here. It allowed me to make changes to the design as needed, and I was able to erase it pretty simply versus using the Sharpie. So next I want to remove material, and sometimes I'll use kind of a rounded blade a little bit, or just a flat blade, and just kind of go through and go from one part of the marking and just kind of start removing material. And it's kind of a slow, tedious kind of thing, but it'll go a lot faster once I'm not holding the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and remove material all the way up and around this, and you'll see the next step along the way. Alright. I went ahead and carved out all the kind of shimmering or glimmering parts of the moon right there, as well as the moon as well. This is your brightest part of the creation, and the rest of it's just simply kind of removing the material. But I thought it'd be better just simply to remove this stuff first before removing the skin of the pumpkin. Went ahead and scraped or skinned the front of the piece. I actually have about 2 other layers I need to go, but the bottom section here is probably going to be the brightest. So in order to achieve that, and I've got like 2 other shades of it, I'm still going to have to actually peel or skin the rest of this up here. But in order to get this to be the brightest, what you're going to do is on the inside of this, you just continue scraping away and making the overall thickness of the pumpkin just thinner. So you want it brighter, make it. Alright, so I have the last finishing touches on this. I went through and added some drill bitted holes in here. I also scraped the front of this a little bit to make it more smooth, whereas the bottom part was more wavy to kind of represent more water. I left also a line of horizon just kind of. Alright, this is the puck light that we like to use. They run on 3 AAA batteries. You can buy them at Walgreens, I think, for about $5 or $6 or so for a pack of, like, I think 6. Anyway, I'm going to put it inside here. They light up really, really well. And I'm turn off the light here. And this is the finished product. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit like and subscribe for more of their videos. Happy Halloween.